Is the Second Amendment about hunting? This seems to be the big debate. Every time you speak about the Second Amendment, someone always uses the phrase, "You do not need that type of gun to go hunting." But is the Second Amendment about hunting? Well, let's look at the true definition of the Second Amendment. But to get the true picture, you need to start with the Declaration of Independence. I think it is important to look at both documents as one, since they were written by the same people in the same basic time, so they share the same thought process. Now let's look at the Declaration of Independence. You see, as we all know, all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed, that whenever any form of government becomes destructive of these ends, it is the right of the people to alter or abolish it, and to institute new government, laying its foundation on such principles and organizing its powers in such form as to them shall seem most likely to affect their safety and happiness. Right off the bat, you see happiness is mentioned twice in this same thought. How many times did you hear the word hunt? Now let's look at this thought for a moment. First of all, since we did not see the word hunt, then you have to look at what the framers of the Constitution were trying to relay to us future generations, since it wasn't hunt. Now we all understand the rights we are given by our Creator, but do we really understand what we are supposed to do about these rights to ensure they are upheld? Now let's look at this part. That to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. To secure these rights. Now here is the only time secure is mentioned in this thought. Now it does not mention secure us from harm. It says secure these rights. Now what rights are those? Let's go back. Remember, unalienable rights. That among these, that means not limited to, are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Now what about unalienable? Because we know what our rights are, but what does it mean to have an unalienable right? Well, our language is derived from the Oxford English Dictionary, basically our language constitution. Well, if you go to the AskOxford.com website, unalienable is defined as inalienable, an adjective. Inalienable is also an adjective, and it is defined as unable to be taken away from or given away by the possessor. Unable to be taken away from or given away by the possessor. That means they cannot take it and they cannot force you to give it away. You always have it. Deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. That is us. We are the governed. And the government is derived from us, for us. They operate with our consent. Now that consent is granted with voting. If you do not vote, then you are basically consenting for them to continue what they do. Now let's move on to what the basis behind the Second Amendment is. It's plain to see how these two documents are linked. Whenever any form of government becomes destructive to these ends, it is the right of the people to alter or abolish it, and to institute new government. It is the right of the people to alter or abolish it. That means we have the right to overthrow our own government when they become destructive to these ends. And what ends are those? Remember the first part. Secure these rights. And we are talking about life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. So our forefathers left us the right and the tools to keep our government in check so they did not infringe upon our happiness. Now, since happiness is mentioned twice in this same thought, what is happiness? It is not defined. Why? Because one man cannot define happiness to another. He can define the feeling of happiness, but what it takes to achieve it, that is individual for every man and woman. So for the sake of morals, let's just say anything that gives you happiness that does not interfere with someone else's happiness. So now we understand what the frame of mind they were in when they wrote this great document. So let's look at the actual amendment. Second Amendment reads, a well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to bear and keep arms shall not be infringed upon. A well-regulated militia. Now this has been a point of confusion for a lot of people. When they think of militia, they think of the National Guard or the Army. Well, this is not the case. Let's read on and see. Being necessary to the security of a free state. Well, that is the basic definition of the whole thing of what a free state is, so we won't go into that. But then you get into the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Now, if the militia is a government-controlled National Guard, then why do the people have this right? Well, then let's go back to the Declaration of Independence. Whenever any form of government becomes destructive to these ends, it is the right of the people to alter or abolish it. We have this right. So when we have to alter or abolish it, you know they're not going to give up power willingly. We will need to take it by force. And if the government has howitzers and we have pitchforks, then it won't be much of a revolution, will it? So now ask yourself again, is the Second Amendment really about hunting? And do you think the government should be taking our guns away? Remember Prohibition? If you outlaw something, then only the outlaws will have it. It is that plain and simple. How well do you trust your government?